swing. This is going to be a home run. Unbelievable! I don't believe what I just saw.
He walked quietly, talked quietly, even hit home runs quietly. So quietly, in fact, that history never heard his footsteps. Because of Babe Ruth's power and stature, we were blinded to Hank Aaron's accomplishments. Because of Aaron's nature, the legacy of Ruth was overwhelming. When Hank's pursuit of Ruth became a national fascination, he found himself playing a very dangerous game.
From his days as our all-time home run king to his recent acts of healing, he has always brought people together. We should follow his example, and we're honored to have him with us tonight. Stand up, Hank Aaron.
He's more at peace with himself. He's beginning to realize that he hasn't been totally shortchanged in his duel with Babe Ruth.
When you look at Hank Aaron's career, you can see a steady trail of white guilt. And you know that white guilt existed because on the 25th anniversary, when he broke Babe Ruth's record for 714, all of a sudden they're doing all these things.
The numbers 44, 715, and 755 have been a part of our sports vernacular for nearly a quarter of a century. But the man who gave us those numbers has remained one of the more underappreciated superstars in any sport. Tonight, that will change.
Recognizing Hank Aaron was something baseball needed. And I think the way people have turned out in the parks around the country in his honor was their way of saying that maybe we didn't understand what you were going through.
We are ready tonight to announce the creation of the Hank Aaron Award, which will be on a par with the Cy Young Award and the Most Valuable Player.
Why did baseball take so long, though, to reach out to Hank Aaron? I don't think Hank was ready in the past to reach out to anyone. He wouldn't have appreciated it. He wouldn't have felt good about himself. He wouldn't have felt good about the award that they're named after him and for him.
They wanted to be so nice and smiley and so lovable to people. I couldn't do it.
I think he expected more out of what he was doing than what he got, but he would never tell you that, and he would never express it.
When you talk to Aaron, I think you understand the depth of how it really affected him and the bitterness and the anger.
I've read where reporters have said that Henry is just bitter. I don't know that Henry is bitter, but why he should be.
For nearly 4 decades, Babe Ruth's home run record hung in the national consciousness like a sacred object.
It's one of those magic numbers. You can walk into a bar, into an office room, and say 714, and people know what you're talking about.
See, that was the one thing that you didn't do. You just didn't beat Ruth.
He learned in America where we've got a lot of hang-ups and a lot of mythology, and he ran tilt into one.
The old hardcore baseball fan sort of resented seeing Babe Ruth's name come down, and there are a lot of them who didn't like the fact that it was a black player doing it.
I knew his secretary, and she said, "Oh, gosh, the letters that Hank is getting, I don't even want to tell him about them."
Hank, there's 3 things you can't give a nigga: a black eye, a puff lip, or a job. Things like this really makes me push just that much harder. I really
You're gonna die, and your family's gonna die. A picture of a gorilla on one side of the page and saying that you are not the man that Babe Ruth was, you never will be, you faggot, nigger, bastard.
The sad thing for America, America was against an American doing something outstanding.
Yes, Henry Aaron has done it at the age of 40. And Henry Aaron, who 2 years ago seriously announced that he was going to challenge the great Bambino, has done it here tonight.
I'm not trying to think that I had some good times, because there was no good times there at all.
I think people get the fact that he hit the home runs, but they don't understand the sacrifice. They don't understand the human sacrifice, the toll that it took, and what it took for him to not blow up.
Aaron's bottled anger was about more than the racism he experienced chasing Babe Ruth. It smoldered in the aftermath of his historic deed, when much of the resentment refused to die.
I would say he was like the lost sheep of the great ones. He never got that great of attention.
Well, I think he contributed the same sort of thing DiMaggio did. There was a quiet excellence there. There was no ostentation.
DiMaggio's aloofness, abruptness, curtness, rudeness, it was seen as some kind of princely grace, where in a black man it's seen as some kind of mean-spirited bitterness. DiMaggio was made into a saint, while Aaron was made into a devil.
Hank Aaron was subject to the interpretation of the white press, like so many other black athletes, calling them natural athletes.
There were adjectives attributed to him in major newspapers that you just wouldn't believe, things like step and fetch it, and Aaron is indolent, lazy, shuffles.
How come a boy who loves to hit as much as Hank takes such a long time meandering up to bat?
I think that sort of a characterization of him when he first came up, it didn't result from examining him in any detail, but just assuming that that's what he was like because he was a Negro from Alabama.
Aaron's lack of flair would cost him in comparison to his greatest contemporary, Willie Mays.
He was such a low-key guy that, you know, me being from New York, maybe they overshadow him at that particular time.
There's Henry Aaron, who looks like he doesn't give a crap about what goes on, you know, and just hitting the ball all over the place, running as fast as Mays, playing the outfield just like Mays, but he's lackadaisical at it.
On a ball, say, hit in right center field, if they were both chasing it, Aaron would be there waiting for it. Willie might just time it, and you'd say, wow, what a catch.
I just didn't feel like I needed to run after the ball if it was 20 rows in the stands, you know, and kick it up all that fuss. I didn't do things with a flair by no stretch of the imagination. You know, what you saw me do on Monday is what you probably would come to the ballpark on Tuesday and Wednesday and see me do.
He says, Willie couldn't do anything I couldn't do, and I was a much better hitter. That's a given. He was 64 years old when he told me that, and he put a kind of a little twist on that's a given, like no one could argue that.
But playing outside the media glare of New York, Aaron spent the bulk of his 23-year career toiling in relative obscurity.
Drove in more runs than Lou Gehrig, scored more runs than Willie Mays, and had over 12 more miles in total bases than the runner-up, Stan Musial.
We wanted home run hitters to look like Ruth. And here's a guy who never hit 50 home runs. What he did, however, was to maintain a level of excellence over a preposterously long period.
He burned with this hard, gem-like flame that was constant. And as a result, you can't disparage his numbers by saying he played so long. Playing that long is itself an achievement that stands alone and deserving admiration.
But those who had problems with Aaron's unyielding pursuit either were unaware or didn't care what it took for him just to get into a major league uniform, a journey through the heart of racism in the Jim Crow South.
We had no electric lights, we had no inside plumbing. If you raised a hog, you raised it for the whole neighborhood. If you plant a garden, you planted it for the whole neighborhood.
Born in 1934 and raised on the outskirts of Mobile, Alabama, a young Henry Aaron learned early on the difference the color of his skin made.
Segregation was the order of the day. There was a tremendous amount of fear. You go downtown to a little bus station, you see signs saying white waiting, colored waiting, the water fountain said colored, white.
You didn't come in contact with white folks except those that was in authority. Rigid segregated pattern. You didn't go to white movies. You couldn't shop in white stores.
The power and the strength was with the whites, you know, because they had the police force. You would have the Ku Klux Klans to march down your street. The rules were set not only for Tolmanville, not only for Alabama, but the rules were set even from Washington, D.C.
Learning the game by playing with tin cans and broomsticks, Aaron never dreamed of reaching the all-white major leagues until Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier in 1947.
Aaron was skipping school and hanging out in the pool halls and listening to the Dodger games to catch reports of Jackie Robinson.
When he was 14 years old, he was playing with the much older guys, and they were throwing the ball like 95 miles per hour, and he was hitting line drives in.
Signed by the Negro American League's Indianapolis Clowns in 1952, Aaron would get his first taste of life on the road.
Can you imagine an 18-year-old kid, black kid, leaving Mobile, Alabama, don't know where you're going with $2 in your pocket?
But he was a shy kid in addition to being, the teenager kind of scared that you must have been, to be leaving a world, the only world you ever known, to go into a world where you might be the enemy.
There's all these veterans who are going out every night and drinking or womanizing, and he's not even old enough to go along with them.
Aaron was sold to the Braves for $10,000 that season. After ripping through Class C pitching in Eau Claire, he was sent to Jacksonville in 1953, becoming one of the first players to integrate the South Atlantic League.
Maybe they didn't realize it, maybe they didn't sense it, but the whole future of sudden democratic ideas are resting on their shoulders.
The stands were still segregated. All the grandstands were full of white people, and there was a rickety old bleachers out in left field that was full of black people.
The first integrated baseball game in Augusta, Georgia, Aaron hit a home run his first time at bat. And then the Jacksonville team went out into the field, and the game had to be stopped because the fans were throwing rocks at Horace Garner. They couldn't reach Aaron at second base.
They would say things like, Andrews, you look blacker every time you come to town. You must be sleeping with Aaron's sister.
The fans were just about like the players were. They just didn't care for you being around.
Henry booted the ball, and it cost us the ball game. We had a pitcher, and he made a comment to the extent that, you can't trust a nigger. When pull comes to tug, they're gonna go in the tank every time. And I remember taking a Louisville Slugger bat and I banging on the lockers, and I said, oh, I'm just gonna say this once and only once. If I ever hear that word used in here again, this bat's gonna go across somebody's skull.
He couldn't stay with the team, couldn't eat with the team, and what he did is he focused on the baseball. He took his aggressions out on the baseball.
Aaron won the MVP award, topping the Class A League in RBIs, runs, and hitting, as he opened eyes in every front office.
Hank would go by the bat rack, grab any bat. It didn't make any difference to him. The weight, the length, or whatever. And he hit 362 in the league, just tore it up.
We went to Jacksonville, he was playing second base, and the first time he came up, I think he hit it right out of my glove. He hit a line drive in the right center field.
After playing winter ball in Puerto Rico, Aaron was scheduled to spend 1954 in the minors. But first, he was called up to the Braves spring training camp for a look-see.
He was just a very quiet, unassuming kid, but the ball just jumped off his bat. I mean, everybody noticed that.
Aaron had hit a ball so hard, Ted Williams heard it in the clubhouse, and he came running out and said, who hit that ball?
Spring training, the Dodgers and the Braves traveled together, and Aaron was on second base, and between pitches, Robinson walked over and shoved some dirt into his shoes. So here was Aaron, a young person, and the great Jackie Robinson had shoved dirt into his shoes. What are you doing? He said, well, I have to do something to slow you down.
One of the writers for the Milwaukee paper asked me what I thought of Aaron. I says, well, I'll tell you, I don't think much of him as a second baseman, but the way he swing a bat, they're going to find a place to play him.
When Bobby Thompson broke his ankle, it was all Aaron needed. With only one season of winter ball in the outfield, he was suddenly the starting left fielder for the Milwaukee Braves.
I wish people would remember the Hank Aaron of the 50s. I had never seen anything quite like that, and I don't know that anybody had.
By his third season, Aaron won his first batting title with a .328 average in 1956. The distinction gained him celebrity status in a community starving for Major League Baseball players of any color.
He hit a line drive right over the second baseman's head and looked like he was going to catch it, and it just kept on carrying and went right on out out over the right field fence.
He could hit balls that looked like they were like it started at the shortstop, and he'd hook them, and they'd go in that hole between third and short.
Every time he hit a ground ball, it went in the hole. Never went to the shortstop or third baseman. Always went in between them.
The next year, Aaron gave a glimpse of things to come. He led the majors with 44 home runs, won the Most Valuable Player award, and clinched the pennant with a homer off the Cardinals' Billy Muffet.
A swing and a drive back into center field. It's a home run. The Braves are the champions of the National League.
It was Milwaukee's first pennant. I was just a kid sitting in the upper deck that night. Orville Faubus was carrying on in Little Rock, Arkansas, and the New York Times in an editorial the next day said they carried a black man off the field in Milwaukee while there were riots in Little Rock.
They would give you a car to drive all year. You get all your gasoline free. You know, you get all your milk and eggs and cheese and butter and all that free.
To get their first world championship since 1914, Aaron and the Braves would have to defeat the New York Yankees.
If you recall, in the 1957 series, Casey made one of his classic remarks about coming into this hick town, and it had the big headline, Hicksville, USA.
They were pretty free-spirit ball club, them Yankees were. They knew they had a good ball club, but we also knew we had a good ball club.
Line grabbed by Matthews, who steps on third, and the World Series is over, and the Milwaukee Braves are the new world champions of baseball.
But even with all the publicity of a world title, Henry Aaron managed to hit .393 and 3 homers without raising much of a fuss.
I ghosted him for 10 articles during the World Series every day for 10 days. I had to go to other players to get comments to put in Hank Aaron's mouth. That's how little he said.
He was in a strange place, and he wasn't comfortable, you know, as he said, speaking the King's English because he spoke Mobile English.
He wasn't a very good interviewer at the time. He didn't give the press a lot to write about, to make headlines or say anything. So they just kind of ignored him.
Aaron again spoke with his bat in '58, taking the Braves to within a game of a second straight World Series title. After closing out the decade by winning his second batting title with a .355 average, Aaron entered the '60s with all the confidence of a major star.
I felt extremely proud of the fact that I knew all of the pitches like I knew the back of my hand. And so I thought any time that I wanted to, when I walked up to the plate, that I could probably hit the ball as hard as anybody or hit it out of the ballpark.
I don't think I ever threw him a fastball. I watch pitchers try to throw fastballs in, out, up, down, and he hit them hard everywhere.
I threw the ball pretty hard, and if I threw a ball inside to him, I couldn't get it by him. You just could not get it by him. He was just that quick.
Sandy Koufax and Don Drysdale called him Bad Henry. I've heard them talk about looking for a weakness of his, and he didn't have any.
For me, he was the toughest out. Everybody else, I had a plan. With Henry, I just never figured out what I was going to do.
Drysdale used to get him out all the time. This one day, he mumbled something along the lines, I'm sick and tired of him getting me out. And then from that day forward, he just destroyed Drysdale.
I saw our guy, Don Drysdale, throw one right across the chin of Hank, and Hank got out of the way, and Don threw another one in there a little closer because Hank didn't get out of the way quick enough. And Hank just turned his wrist over and just hit a screaming line drive down the left field line. And so the thing was, maybe you shouldn't throw it, Hank, just leave him alone.
When you knock Aaron down, you weren't doing yourself any good because he got tougher.
Well, Hank was knocked down a lot. I mean, he had a lot of pitchers that truly hated him.
With his reputation established as a hitter, Aaron now set out to find his power. Taking on all comers in 1960, he became Home Run Derby's hottest contestant.
I remember when I got my invitation, and they didn't think I was going to stay on that long, but I kind of fooled them.
High fly ball going back deep in the left center field. This could be a $2,000 hit. It is gone over the left field wall for the home run.
I beat a lot of guys. I beat a lot of those home run hitters, you know, the guys that were supposed to be hitting 45 and 50 home runs, you know. I took them to the cleaners.
And this is the fourth check for $2,000 that you have received, making a total of $8,500 that you've won on Home Run Derby, and that makes you the all-time money-winning champion.
Although Aaron's numbers continued to grow, the Braves never won another pennant in Milwaukee. And in 1966, Aaron was marching to Atlanta, leading the Braves into the southern heart of America's civil rights struggle.
The fact that it was the first professional major league franchise in any sport to be played in the southeast of the United States was a momentous event. It was 100 years after Reconstruction, ending in the Civil War.
Atlanta had just legally integrated in 1964. We had just put forward through the Chamber of Commerce an ad campaign saying a city too busy to hate. And it wasn't exactly true yet, but that's what our advertisement slogan said.
Aaron represented and kind of crystallized a whole racial dynamic of blacks trying to present their humanity to the rest of the country.
The civil rights movement had already shocked the New South. Here comes a face that's on their team, but still had that dignity. Don't mess with him, don't talk down to him.
As the civil rights movement entered the late 60s, Aaron began to extend his influence beyond the baseball field.
I don't think there's any question about the fact that then he began to see himself as someone who should adopt an agenda or become a part of one.
His whole character changed. He wasn't that easygoing, quiet kid that I knew in the late 50s. When he told me in '65 he wanted to become the first black manager, this was a big story.
And I'm looking forward to one day that a black will be able to run a professional ball club. And I'm hoping that that black will be me.
Hank was raising questions about black managers, black coaches, black ownership.
Aaron was involved in the early 60s in trying to integrate the spring training facilities in Florida. The ideas that he espoused later in his career were not new. He had really been saying those all along. People hadn't been listening.
When I first came into the league, that if I had said something about racial indifference then, would it have made the paper? No, it wouldn't have.
Aaron waiting. Swung on. There she goes.
When I was in high school, I wrote a paper for an English class on why no one would ever break Babe Ruth's career home run record. And I joined a long line of people who said this record will never be broken, when in truth it was about to be broken very quickly.
By the end of the 1969 season, the 35-year-old Aaron was still 160 home runs shy of Ruth's total of 714. But Hank kept hammering away, as though time were never a factor.
Hank Aaron grew on the public. We did not think of him as a home run hitter until he'd been a major leaguer for 15 years.
649 puts him in second place. Mays has 648.
His reputation changed to suddenly the home run hitter who was going to break Ruth's record.
We go to Astrodome and go right over the fence. We go in Chicago, go right in the basket. And I remember one day he told me, he said, Dusty, it's not how far, it's how many.
He hit 47 home runs in 1971. And when he did that, you said, wow, he's actually going to do it. That puts him over the hump. All he's got to do now is stay healthy and avoid major injury.
Nobody believed it. And it wasn't until September of 73 that the country sort of said, oh, wait a minute, this guy's going to do it.
Swinging, there's a drive. Left center, going. It's out of here for 7-13.
But the combination of Aaron's approach to history and the color of his skin proved too much for some of the public to handle.
That record didn't mean nothing to black folks that wasn't into sports. It was when they added the racial thing to it, then for the first time we knew it was important.
Martin Luther King's death in 1968, riots in 1969, it was the white backlash after the civil rights movement. People are waking up.
All the racists, all the people who thought that maybe blacks shouldn't be in this game in the first damn place, suddenly had reason to jump up on their high heels.
He received more mail than anyone in the country. Any celebrity, any movie star, TV personality.
He showed me some of the letters that were written to him. They were awful. They were just awful. They made you cry for the country.
The FBI informed him after a certain point they preferred that he not open his own mail.
We didn't even know he was getting all the letters. He didn't never just want all the publicity on him.
I never even heard him discuss death threats. I knew about it from his children and that they were under pressure.
And what Henry had to go through with the threats, and knowing most of them he kept inside until it was over with, because otherwise it would look like he was crybaby during that whole thing that should have been a happy time in his life, and he was being tortured.
I never thought that playing baseball would bring out so many negative and bigoted thoughts in people's mind. You know, I thought maybe they would be behind me 100%, but that was not the case.
A couple of times we've gone to dinner in West Palm Beach. Well, I always tell him, don't sit with your back to the door. I always had a binocular case on my shoulder, but it wasn't binoculars. They knew I had a .38 in it.
You never saw him anywhere. And if you did, he was with his bodyguard and probably some other people around there who would just back up for him.
He would have to retire to his hotel room at nights on the road and count how many times the neon light flashed across the street out his hotel window.
I reestablished contact in the winter of '73 when I went over to the hotel and was met by two FBI agents that put me against the wall, not too gently either. And I said, "What's all this?" And he said, "Joe, it's kill a nigger, you know. They don't want me to do it. They don't want me to do it."
Henry Aaron was a moment in time. We're going to see something here that has been going on for how many years with Babe Ruth? Now we're going to see a moment in time.
That change would have to wait through the winter of 1973, as Aaron hovered just one homer away from tying Ruth's record. In the off-season lull, he made Billy Williams his second wife, then steeled himself for the crush of media in the spring of '74.
The editors would put pressure on you. Somebody saw Hank brushing his teeth with his left hand. Does that mean that he has a sore right wrist? And your editor would call you and say, "What's the matter with Hank's wrist?"
In the days leading up to the Braves' 1974 opener against the Reds, the question of where Aaron would hit his historic home run fueled controversy.
The Atlanta club announced that Henry wouldn't play in the series in Cincinnati. And I said, "Oh, no, you don't. You're going to Cincinnati to win ball games."
How can you have a legitimate game if you're not going to play the best player in baseball?
The commissioner ruled Aaron must play 2 of the 3 games in Cincinnati, including the April 4th opener, which also happened to be the 6th anniversary of the death of an American hero.
Bowie Kuhn asked if there's anything that baseball can do for him that day. He says yes, a moment of silence for Martin Luther King Jr.
I requested that we have a moment of silence, and for some reason they found that the schedule didn't permit them to today, and I was just a little disappointed in it.
They ask him what he wants, he tells them, they say no, and then orders him to play in a game that he doesn't want to play. So baseball is kind of saying, yeah, you're important, but you're not that important.
The excitement is here, and Aaron can put on the finishing touch.
There was the breaking ball, and it was just that simple.
3-1 pitch. There's the drive into left field. That ball is going, and out of here. Henry Aaron has just tied Babe Ruth in the all-time home run parade.
But when Aaron didn't hit another homer in Cincinnati, history would have to wait at least until the home opener in Atlanta, when the commissioner was conspicuous by his absence.
I was scheduled to be in Cleveland for a meeting of the Wahoo Club, which was the Cleveland fan club. So I asked Monty Irvin, my assistant, to go down and be there and represent me. I've always thought that was frivolous criticism, as if you're going to expect a commissioner to follow the player around.
I just thought maybe if I might be in there, it would be okay. But apparently Hank never forgave him for not being there.
We all thought that he stayed out of town for the simple reason he didn't want to come here and be booed, which he would have been.
Even without the commissioner, a sellout crowd packed with celebrities came to see the record fall.
Let me just tell you my own little story. It's about Sammy Davis Jr. We had a dinner for him that night at our home. I said, Sammy, if he hits it, and if you're not there, will you ever forgive yourself?
And all of a sudden, you go to Fulton County Stadium and the place is packed. It's more electricity than I've ever seen in a ballpark.
And once again, a standing ovation for Henry Aaron.
Cameras from everywhere. It was just like a madhouse. You know, everybody wanted to be there.
The press box was overflowing. The stands were overflowing. It seemed like almost a foregone conclusion that when he came to bat, he was going to hit the ball out of the ballpark.
Henry Aaron in the second inning walked and scored. He's sitting on 7-14.
We had told all the ushers at the stadium, when Hank comes to bat, don't face the field of play, face the stands.
As soon as Henry got into the batter's box, everybody kind of held their breath, and it was complete silence.
Aaron waiting, the outfield deep and straight away.
I remember I was on the deck circle and Hank said, man, I'm going to get this over with right away, so I'm tired of this. He said, this guy's going to throw me a slider way up, and he comes back in, I'm going to hit him over the left field wall.
Here's the pitch by Downing, swinging. There's a drive into left center field. That ball is going to be out of here. It's gone. It's 7-15. There's a new home run champion of all time, and it's Henry Aaron.
My great fear, though, was when I saw the two young men run out on the field. Now that was scary.
Billy reached down and grabbed me around the neck, and she's so overjoyed, I can't see anything. And when she turns me loose and I look around, here's these guys on the field. And my first thought again was, no, not now.
I just closed my eyes and I thought, oh my God, do they have something? Are they going to do something to him?
In one sense, it looked dangerous. In another way, it looked beautiful. It was a testimony to the way the city of Atlanta appreciated the impact that Hank Aaron had on this city.
That poker face of Aaron shows the tremendous relief. What a marvelous moment for baseball. What a marvelous moment for the country and the world. A black man is getting a standing ovation in the Deep South for breaking a record of an all-time baseball idol.
The only thing that really startled him about hitting the home run was his mother was waiting for him at home plate.
It was a hug unlike any hug that I've ever had before. She had me by the neck, and that was it.
Bill Buckner, the left fielder, tried to go up and get it. He climbed the fence. He couldn't get it.
I think at the time I was making about $20,000, and they said the ball was going to be worth $50,000, so everybody was trying to get the baseball. Tom House caught the ball on the fly in the bullpen.
If I would have stood perfectly still in that little 10-yard real estate area, would have hit me right in the forehead. And then the next thing I remember was giving it to him at home plate.
And I feel this tug during all the commotion. I feel this little tug on my coat. And it's Sammy Davis Jr. And I gotta have the ball. I gotta have the ball. He said $20,000 for that ball. I remember telling him, I can't sell it. It's not my ball to sell.
I'd just like to say to all the fans here this evening, and I just thank God it's all over with. Thank you very much.
He came over to the stand where I was, and we just embraced, and he just said, I'm so glad it's over. I'm so glad it's over.
There was a party at his house. He went down to a room all by himself, got down on his knee and cried. And I don't know that would be considered to be tears of joy, just pent-up energy that he just had to release.
After he broke the record, it was a different type of smile. It was in your face. We did it, and nothing happened to him.
Once, during a difficult time,
Hank, if he'd been playing in New York or playing anywhere else during his whole career, he would have gotten a lot of endorsements. The feeling among the players and among us was that he never really got his just due as far as commercials go.
When Hank Aaron got his first endorsement contract with Magnavox, it was a real breakthrough for this country, but it also, even though he was happy he got it, had to put that exclamation point out there. Why in God's name did it take me all these years, breaking all these records to get an endorsement contract?
I remember the day they filmed the commercial with all the TV sets were all over the outfield. It was a disaster for Magnavox. I don't think they sold all those TV sets that they had in the outfield. He just is not marketable.
When we return, Henry Aaron faces life after 7:15. After breaking Ruth's all-time home run record, Henry Aaron struggled to find meaning in the remainder of the 1974 season.
7:15 was a really, really anticlimactic day, and everybody left. I am going to wager that by the ninth inning of that game, there weren't 10,000 people left in the seat.
And near the end of that season, he wanted out of Atlanta. He didn't think he was appreciated down here, and he wanted to trade. He asked for the trade, and he got the trade to Milwaukee.
Welcome home, welcome home. It's so good to have you back where you belong.
You know, when you saw Hank Aaron near the end in Milwaukee, it's really a sad sight. Here was this overweight icon in this glorified softball uniform for the Milwaukee Brewers. You didn't know whether to cringe or to cry. So you sort of did both.
In his second year there, when he was unable to perform at the level he was accustomed to, he understood that, it's time.
Aaron retired after the 1976 season with 755 home runs. Now he's struggled to find gratification without a bat in his hands.
Here's a guy that broke a lot of barriers, not only as far as home runs are concerned, but in terms of being a strong black man. There was this one incident when Hank Aaron kind of threw his name out that, yeah, I would like to be a commissioner one day of Major League Baseball. And it was sort of like, it was a joke. They didn't take him seriously.
He had no place in baseball. You would not consider him to be commissioner or a front office person. With the exception of Ted Turner's sensitivity in reaching out, Hank Aaron would be out of baseball, and that would be a sin.
After taking a position as the Atlanta Braves Vice President of Player Development in 1976, Aaron began to release some of the emotion he kept inside during his pursuit of the Babe.
What he had to go through, I don't think he's still gotten over it. In fact, I know he hasn't. Some of the letters he received during that time, death threats and things said, still bother him today.
He keeps the letters because he doesn't want to forget. He shouldn't forget. We shouldn't forget. They show a part of America that is ugly, that exists.
At one point I said to Hank, has that obscured for you the fact that millions and millions of Americans, not just black Americans, admired and respected you? His face softened and he said, I know that's true, but it still doesn't change what I had to go through.
I think when you have experienced racism in the way that Hank Aaron experienced it, you may never have rest again. This may be something that is in your mind when you're asleep, in your mind when you're awake.
He is still very much an inward type personality. He is still very much a loner.
He's wary of people to some extent for all that he's been through. He still guards his drinks, when he's eating in public.
When I was with the Cleveland Browns, I was in training camp one summer afternoon, and I looked over and I thought I saw Hank Aaron with the Cleveland Browns cap standing behind the ropes. And I walked over to him and I said, "Are you Hank Aaron?" And he said, "Yeah," and I don't think he really wanted, anybody to recognize him.
There are certain people, and maybe Hank is one of those among them, who have just spent too much time dwelling on the perception of how people respond to them when the perception doesn't match reality.
From his throne as the new home run king and as a member of the Braves front office, he spoke with conviction on matters of race in baseball.
I just felt like as a black person who had played this game and had played for 23 years, it was my responsibility as a black person to tell the truth about things, tell the truth about issues.
He's a guy who continues to make known his disappointment that baseball has not reached out to people of color.
And so as a result, he's rarely taken in an intimate sense by anybody who knows the game. Does that lessen his appeal? Perhaps. Does it lessen his impact? No, I don't think so.
Vocal in controversies surrounding Al Campanis and Marge Schott, Aaron was also a voice of reason in the media fracas created by John Rocker in 1999.
Hank Aaron was one of the most outspoken critics against John Rocker when he made these statements to Sports Illustrated. Then, somewhere down the road, we understand and we see Hank Aaron meeting with John Rocker for an hour, then saying that everything is dandy. I find that very curious on the one hand. On the other hand, you have to understand Hank Aaron. Hank Aaron is a very nice man. Hank Aaron is a guy that really deep down inside believes that people should get along.
When Hank Aaron and Andrew Young together went to Rocker and said, all right, we'd like to hear your side of this, I think it toned a lot of the problem down in Atlanta, and I think it also raised Henry Aaron to a greater stature in baseball.
Aaron's contributions to the game exceed his numbers, even to the player who passed his home run total in 2007.
I admire Hank Aaron. We know the situation. We can feel his pain. We can understand what he's gone through. Did we go through it? No. Do we know what it's like? No. Do we appreciate what he stood for and what he has given us? Oh, yes.
The black athlete had become institutionalized in the big leagues, but none of them had taken away something sacred from the white historical record until this little guy from Mobile comes along and erases the most sacred of all records. If anything, that would be his legacy, is to put the black player over that hump.
Hank Aaron ultimately proved that he was a better power hitter than Willie Mays. But because perception and location count for greatness, Aaron comes up short in the popular view. He never reached the magical threshold of 50 homers in a season and never played in New York. Too bad Hank doesn't get any points for sustained excellence, especially late in the game. He hit 245 home runs after the age of 35. For ESPN Classic Sports Century, I'm Chris Fowler.